The spirit that commands all spectral apparitions in the Hudson River Valley is not a ghost. It is the restless phantom of a Hessian mercenary who lost his head to a cannonball during the Revolutionary War. He is condemned to ride every night, searching for his severed head. But the true terror of the legend is centered on one man, Ichabod Crane. After attending a harvest feast on a cold autumn night, he vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only the shattered remains of a pumpkin and a broken saddle. Did he finally fall victim to the galloping wrath of the Headless Horseman, or was his disappearance the perfect crime? The story unfolds in a small, isolated glen near Tarrytown, New York, a pocket of the world known universally as Sleepy Hollow. This is not merely a place, it is an atmosphere, a perpetual state of dreamy, hypnotic influence that permeates the air and settles upon the minds of its inhabitants, all descendants of the original Dutch settlers. The valley is said to be bewitched, perhaps by an ancient prophet or an indigenous shaman. This supernatural force dictates that the residents live in a continuous state of half-waking reverie, eternally susceptible to visions, belief in marvels, and deep-seated superstitions that intensify with the coming of twilight. Dominating this enchanted region is the terrifying figure of the Headless Horseman. The legend states he is the phantom of a Hessian mercenary whose head was violently severed by a cannonball during a Revolutionary War battle. His remains were buried in the local churchyard, and now, each night, he rides the valley in a desperate, thunderous search for his lost head. The entity is known as the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow, or simply the Galloping Hessian. His fierce urgency is attributed to the chilling need to reach the safety of the churchyard before the break of dawn, lest he be lost to the day. Into this reclusive, superstitious realm came Ichabod Crane, an itinerant pedagogue hailing from Connecticut. Ichabod had taken up residence in Sleepy Hollow to instruct the local children, a necessity that quickly integrated him into the life of the community. His sustenance was precarious, drawn primarily from a rustic, single-room log schoolhouse. To supplement his meager income, he subscribed to the local custom of being housed and fed week by week, rotating among the homes of the prosperous farmers whose children he taught. He was a master of agreeable pretense, helping with light farm chores and even rocking babies, all while serving as the neighborhood's itinerant singing master. His sustenance was precarious, drawn primarily from a rustic, single-room log schoolhouse. To supplement his meager income, he subscribed to the local custom of being housed and fed week by week, rotating among the homes of the prosperous farmers whose children he taught. He was a master of agreeable pretense, helping with light farm chores and even rocking babies, all while serving as the neighborhood's itinerant singing master. But beneath his calculating exterior lay a fatal flaw: profound credulity. Ichabod was a devoted, potent believer in the darkest superstitions, particularly those detailed in Cotton Mather's History of New England Witchcraft. The oppressive atmosphere of Sleepy Hollow only intensified his already frantic imagination. The slightest nocturnal sound, the hoot of an owl, the clumsy flight of a beetle, would send him into a panic, fearing it was the ominous warning of a witch's sign. His only defense against malevolent spirits was to chant psalms in a loud, nasal monotone. He cultivated his own terror, indulging in long winter nights spent listening to the horrific tales spun by the old Dutch housewives. These stories of ghosts, goblins, and the terrifying galloping Hessian were his greatest enjoyment. But the deep-seated fear that clung to him on his midnight walk back home was the heavy price he paid for this macabre diversion. Ichabod Crane's ambition for a comfortable life was suddenly crystallized by the figure of Katrina Van Tassel. She was the only daughter and heiress of Baltus Van Tassel, a substantial Dutch farmer whose wealth was visible in every sprawling acre of his land. Katrina was an attractive young woman, robust and plump as a partridge, famed not just for her natural beauty, but for the tantalizing prospect of her vast expectations of inheritance. She was also known to be quite the coquette, enjoying the attention of numerous suitors. Upon first visiting the Van Tassel farm, Ichabod's desire was instantly transferred from Katrina to her opulence. He wasn't just charmed by the girl, he was utterly captivated by the tangible promise of wealth. The colossal barn overflowing with harvest, the overwhelming abundance of livestock, pigs, geese, turkeys, and the endless fields ripe for gathering. He immediately began to fantasize, transforming this rustic Eden into ready money, which he planned to use to buy land and settle in the fertile regions of Kentucky or Tennessee, with Katrina, of course, as his willing prize. His primary and most formidable rival was Abraham Van Brunt, better known throughout the valley as Brom Bones. Brom was the local hero, powerful, burly, famed for his equestrian skill, and a relentless prankster. Brom had been vigorously courting Katrina for some time, and while his affections were often abrupt and clumsy, she never seemed to discourage his advances. The sight of Brom's formidable horse, Daredevil, tied to the Van Tassel fence on Sunday nights, was a well-understood signal for any other pretenders to abandon their suits. A confrontation between the lanky pedagogue and the burly hero was inevitable. But Ichabod, acutely aware of Brom's physical superiority, avoided open conflict. He used his official position as singing master as a pretext for frequent visits to the farm, where he employed his subtle, intellectual charms against the rougher appeal of his rival. In retaliation, Brom Bones and his gang escalated their rivalry into a campaign of persistent, humorous, but psychologically cruel persecution. They would smoke out Ichabod's schoolhouse, blocking the chimney. They would invade the abandoned school at night, turning everything upside down in a parody of witchcraft. And most humiliatingly, Brom constantly ridiculed Ichabod in Katrina's presence, going so far as to teach a dog to howl comically whenever Ichabod attempted to sing his psalms. The rivalry was no longer a joke. It was a battle for the ultimate prize, and Ichabod's psychological frailty was Brom's greatest weapon. The rivalry reached its terrifying zenith on the night of the great autumn quilting frolic at the Van Tassel mansion. Ichabod arrived, mounted precariously on gunpowder, a lean, aged horse with a surprisingly demonic spirit, which he had reluctantly borrowed from the ill-tempered Hans van Ripper. At the feast, Ichabod was transported to a land of abundance. He gorged himself on the sumptuous Dutch banquet, piles of smoking cakes, flaky pies, roasted meats, and carved turkeys. He reveled in his awkward, self-conscious dance with Katrina, all while the formidable Brom Bones sat brooding, consumed by jealousy and resentment. After the dance, the older generation, led by Van Tassel, gathered to smoke and tell stories. The talk inevitably turned to the supernatural and the terrifying legends that permeated the haunted region. They spoke of the pale woman in white and the ghost of Major Andre. But the focus, the consuming dread of the valley, was always the Headless Horseman. A particularly chilling tale was shared about Old Brewer, a staunch non-believer who claimed to have met the horseman and was forced to ride pillion with the goblin. Upon reaching the church bridge, the critical point of the horseman's vanishing act, the specter transformed into a skeleton, hurled Brewer into the creek, and disappeared in a peal of thunder. Then came Brom Bones' grand tale, his own supposed adventure. He recounted running a race with the galloping Hessian on his horse, Daredevil. Brom claimed he was winning, but the phantom vanished in a flash of fire exactly as it reached the church bridge. These stories served their dark purpose, sinking deep into the already fertile, superstitious mind of Ichabod. He reciprocated, trying to outdo the villagers with extracts of terrifying lore drawn directly from Cotton Mather's books. The night ended not in triumph, but in utter defeat. Ichabod managed to secure a private conversation with Katrina, but the result was devastatingly unfavorable. He emerged from the house dejected and desolate, his dream of wealth and love shattered by clear rejection. Ichabod began his lonely journey home in the dead of night. The world seemed as dark and bleak as his shattered ambition. Every ghost story he had heard, every dark tale of the Hessen now clawed its way back into his memory. He passed the notorious Major Andre tree, a colossal, gnarled tulip tree linked to a tragic hanging. Ichabod desperately tried to whistle, but the sound of the wind and the creaking branches only amplified his mounting terror. A few hundred yards beyond the tree, he reached a small log bridge that crossed the creek in Wiley's swamp. This spot was infamous, a place considered deeply haunted. Gunpowder, the borrowed horse, became stubborn and resistant, his feet dragging. Suddenly, just at the stream's bank, shrouded in the darkness of the thicket, Ichabod glimpsed something huge, misshapen, and towering. He challenged the dark object, demanding to know who stood there, but received no response. In his rising panic, he resorted to his only defense, chanting a psalm in a loud, wavering voice. The ominous object moved. It revealed itself to be a rider of immense size, mounted on a powerful black steed. Ichabod desperately spurred Gunpowder, trying to leave his silent companion behind, but the dark stranger maintained the pace, silent and relentlessly paced alongside him. As they ascended a small rise, the formidable figure of the rider was silhouetted against the night sky. Ichabod saw the outline, and the realization hit him with a physical force that froze his blood. The rider was without a head, carrying its severed head on the pommel of the saddle. Ichabod's fear transformed into raw, desperate terror. He spurred Gunpowder mercilessly. The horse, possessed by a sudden demonic energy, bolted from the road, plunging down a steep descent toward the church bridge, the one sanctuary in the valley. Mid-descent, the borrowed Sunday saddle slipped, and Ichabod lost it entirely, hearing it immediately trampled by the relentless pursuer. He clung desperately to Gunpowder's neck. He sighted the church bridge, the critical point where all the ghost stories claimed the phantom vanished. Gunpowder thundered across the planks. Ichabod looked back one last time, expecting the goblin to dissipate in a flash of sulfur and fire. But the specter did not vanish. It rose in its stirrups, swinging the terrible severed head above its shoulders, and hurled the gruesome projectile directly at the terrified teacher. The heavy missile struck Ichabod's skull with a tremendous crash, pitching him headlong into the dust of the road. The headless horseman and the black steed swept past like a dark whirlwind. The next morning, Gunpowder was found calmly grazing at the gate of Hans Van Ripper, missing its saddle. Ichabod Crane was gone. The investigation uncovered the smashed saddle on the road, and, chillingly, just at the stream's bank beyond the bridge, Ichabod's forgotten hat lying next to a shattered pumpkin. The creek was thoroughly searched, but Ichabod's body was never found. The community rendered its final verdict. Ichabod had been taken by the galloping Hessian. The abandoned schoolhouse was soon claimed by the legend, and the melancholic ghost of the pedagogue, singing psalms, was said to haunt the building. But there was a rational shadow cast over the supernatural conclusion. Shortly after the disappearance, Brom Bones married the radiant Katrina. Brom would demonstrate a remarkably knowing grin and laugh uproariously whenever the story was told and the shattered pumpkin was mentioned, leading some to suspect he knew far more about the incident than he revealed. Was Ichabod truly claimed by the Hessian, the ultimate victim of Sleepy Hollow's curse? Or was his terror a masterpiece of physical revenge, orchestrated by his powerful rival? The story remains suspended between the palpable terror of the spectral and the calculating cruelty of the human heart. The final silence of Sleepy Hollow holds the only answer. Leave your verdict in the comments below. Was it the Headless Horseman? Or was it Brom Bones? Don't forget to subscribe to Shadow Tales Illustrated for more dark chronicles from the edges of reality.